Recording in progress.
Okay. Well, welcome to our session, Ensuring the Future of Sustainable Water Data for Citizens, Scientists, and Policymakers. We know that to accelerate the progress towards the achievement of SDG 6 and other water-related goals, actors from across many disciplines and sectors must work together to collect and integrate different types of data. The goal of this session is to show how citizens, statisticians, technical leads, data scientists, and policymakers all have roles to play in creating an appetite for evidence, funding the collection of data, generating and analyzing them, and disseminating findings across generation and sector to produce action. To debate these topics, we have gathered a panel of experts representing as many facets as possible of data collections and data use. And our first question goes to Mr. Érik Orsenna, the famous writer, economist, member of the French Academy, president of the Initiative for the Future of the Great River. Mr. Orsenna, in your book, The Future of Water, you write that the water is so necessary to humankind that, in their wisdom, they would rather negotiate to share than enter in destructive conflict. But in the very same page, you also noted that the increased demographic pressure may change the deal and the water conflict might become more frequent and severe. So my question is, how sharing data about water can help with sharing water and avoiding conflict? And the second question is, to you as a writer, as a wizard of words, in your opinion, what would be the magic word to convince politicians and decision makers of the good of investing in data on water? Monsieur Orsenna, dans votre bouquin L'avenir de l'eau, vous...
J'ai tout compris.
Ah ok, parfait.
J'ai tout compris. Dans les temps très très anciens, j'étais à la London School of Economics. Et donc, il me reste quelques souvenirs de cette époque intéressante. Alors, merci beaucoup de m'accueillir. Merci beaucoup pour ces questions qui sont clés. Il se trouve que j'ai commencé à travailler sur l'eau il y a une vingtaine d'années en faisant donc ce tour du monde pour l'avenir de l'eau. Et depuis ces 13 années où j'ai publié ce livre, bien, la situation est pire, puisqu'on voit se faire sentir le dérèglement climatique. Les raretés se sont tendues du fait de la pression démographique et surtout de l'urbanisation des populations. C'est-à-dire que, au fond, les populations veulent être connectées évidemment avec tous nos petits réseaux sociaux, mais aussi connectées sur les grands flux. Et c'est pour ça que les villes se concentrent tous au bord de l'eau, que l'eau soit salée ou que l'eau soit douce. Donc, les tensions montent, les raretés s'exacerbent. Et puis, comme vous savez, dans le dérèglement climatique, il y a l'enchaînement des phénomènes extrêmes. Donc, c'est pour vous dire que la question du partage est absolument clé. Alors, je reviens d'une session de notre association à Genève et nous avions avec nous, qui sont membres de notre association très actifs, l'organisation de la mise en valeur de la vallée du Sénégal, ce qui est un des exemples les plus formidables justement du partage, c'est-à-dire la reconnaissance que le fleuve Sénégal est un bien commun et qu'il faut gérer en commun avec les 4 pays signataires qui sont, comme vous savez, la Guinée, le Mali, la Mauritanie et le Sénégal. Et donc, ces agents-là, ce qu'ils ont réussi à faire est assez formidable. Et je vous rappelle qu'à un moment donné où il y avait des tensions extrêmement fortes, comme d'habitude, entre les éleveurs et les agriculteurs, et notamment entre la Mauritanie et le Sénégal, dans la région de Podor, qu'est-ce qui a retrouvé la paix, permis de relancer le dialogue et de retrouver la paix? Eh bien, c'est l'OMVS, c'est l'organisation de ce fleuve. Et donc, cette question-là est absolument clé. Si on voit d'autres parties du monde, vous savez qu'il y a des tensions extrêmement fortes entre l'Éthiopie et l'Égypte pour le contrôle du Nil, et 80% du débit du Nil, comme vous savez aussi bien que moi, c'est le fleuve bleu qui vient des hautes montagnes d'Éthiopie, et que la construction du barrage Renaissance est évidemment une pote de discorde extrêmement tendue entre l'Égypte et l'Éthiopie. Et personne ne sait comment ça va se régler. Donc, il est nécessaire, là, c'est vraiment la sagesse voudrait qu'il y ait une sorte d'accord entre les deux. Et pour être franc, il est beaucoup plus intéressant, intelligent, d'avoir construit ce barrage en hauteur, c'est-à-dire en Éthiopie, plutôt que dans un des endroits où l'évaporation est la plus forte. Et donc, cette question-là est extrêmement inquiétante. Si on remonte un peu plus au nord, on sait que les barrages turcs et les barrages du haut de la Syrie et de l'Irak sont en très mauvais état. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer? Et qu'est-ce qui va se passer s'il y a une absence de partage de l'eau du Tigre et de l'Euphrate, qui était un des hauts lieux de la civilisation de cette partie du monde? Et les tensions sur l'eau là sont évidemment exacerbées d'année en année. D'autant plus que les endroits où il y a l'eau en Turquie sont principalement les endroits où il y a les Kurdes. Donc il y a des tensions qui se rajoutent. Si vous allez un peu plus vers l'ouest, vous avez évidemment la tension entre l'Inde et le Bangladesh. Je me souviens d'avoir été rencontrer le maire de Calcutta et il m'a dit, puisque demain vous allez au Bangladesh, dites à vos futurs amis de Dhaka qu'on n'en peut plus des immigrés. Et quand j'ai rencontré les autorités du Bangladesh, elles m'ont dit, si les autorités indiennes n'avaient pas construit un barrage sur le Gange juste avant notre frontière, on n'en serait pas là. Parce qu'en construisant ce barrage, ça a diminué les débits. Les débits n'ont plus permis de lutter contre la montée des eaux salées du golfe du Bengale. Et donc, nous avons du sel dans nos rizières. Et donc, nous n'avons plus de riz. Et si on continue, c'est pareil avec le Mékong. Donc, vous voyez, ce que je veux dire, c'est qu'il y a très, très peu d'endroits où il y a du partage. Très peu d'endroits où il y a du partage. Regardez la situation du delta du Vietnam, qui produit 60% du riz de ce pays. Et donc, il y a de moins en moins d'eau. Tout, sans exception, tous les deltas du monde sont menacés. Et 500 millions à 600 millions d'êtres humains vivent sous les... voilà. Donc, ça, c'est pour la première question. Donc, la tension est pire que ce que j'avais décrit il y a 13 ans. La tension s'accélère avec ce cocktail meurtrier de rareté et de phénomènes extrêmes. Et vous savez que cette sorte de paradoxe qui frappe l'économiste que je suis, mais aussi le romancier, c'est que les régions qui ont le moins d'eau potable, c'est les régions qui souffrent d'inondations, parce qu'elles sont submergées par les eaux, et l'eau, on ne peut pas l'utiliser. Donc c'est une sorte de terrible, comme ça, frustration. Pour répondre à la question, alors moi, la question, la réponse, elle est un mot, et vous m'avez posé la question, et je suis passé au fond de l'analyse de l'eau à l'analyse des fleuves. Pourquoi? Parce que l'eau, c'est une matière dont chacun sait qu'elle est absolument indispensable. Il se trouve qu'à l'Académie française, je suis le successeur de Pasteur. Et Pasteur disait, nous buvons 80% de nos maladies. Bon, l'eau, donc, c'est évidemment, tout le monde le sait, nécessaire pour l'ensemble du vivant. Mais l'eau, c'est un peu abstrait. C'est une matière abstraite. Alors que le fleuve est un personnage. Et ça, c'est le romancier qui parle, mais c'est aussi l'être humain. C'est un personnage à qui nous devons de vivre, mais qui a un début, qui a une fin, pas toujours, parce que nombre de fleuves n'atteignent pas la mer maintenant. On l'a vu, on le voit en Australie, on le voit en Colorado, on l'a vu souvent dans le fleuve jaune. Donc, si vous commencez à parler de fleuve, ça veut dire un être humain que vous pouvez adopter, que vous devez respecter, dont vous connaissez l'histoire. Toutes les civilisations, la plupart des civilisations et des religions mondiales sont nées avec des fleuves. Donc, si vous donnez une sorte d'identité au fleuve, d'ailleurs, il y a tout un mouvement d'identité juridique qui travaillent, et j'ai participé hier à la nuit du droit au Conseil d'État français, et qui pose cette question-là, très intéressante. Est-ce que c'est par un progrès du droit qu'on va sauver l'environnement? Donc ça, c'est la première chose, c'est le fleuve. Et le fleuve, c'est un bassin. Donc un bassin, c'est-à-dire l'ensemble de tout cet écosystème, c'est-à-dire les affluents qui arrivent, les confluences, tout ce que ça donne, les forêts, les montagnes, les glaciers, tout ça. Donc moi, je ne suis pas pour cette globalisation, vous voyez, une organisation de l'eau, des Nations Unies de l'eau, bon, c'est très bien, mais ce n'est pas là que ça va se jouer. Ça va jouer en termes de bassin. Moi, je pense que la paix du monde, la paix aquatique du monde, sera la paix des bassins. Et qu'il y a une sorte là de diplomatie du bassin. On sait qu'on lance l'hydrodiplomatie en ce moment, mais c'est au niveau des bassins. Donc, en résumé, la situation est pire que celle que j'avais décrite il y a 13 ans. Elle est pire. C'est des centres de tension très fortes. Il se trouve que je suis maintenant professeur à l'école de guerre à Paris, et les tensions militaires sur ces questions sont en train de devenir difficilement supportables. Et la réponse, c'est les fleuves. Et les fleuves pour tous les âges. C'est-à-dire que quand vous expliquez l'eau à des enfants en classe, à des enfants de 10 ans, ils vous regardent très bien. Quand vous dites que c'est un fleuve ou que c'est, et d'où il vient, à ce moment-là, ils vous écoutent parce qu'il était une fois, once upon a time. Voilà, j'ai fini de vous saouler, mais j'étais heureux et fier de participer à ce World Data Forum.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Orsenna. Thank you very much, Mr. Orsenna, for your very interesting intervention. If you allow me, I will briefly try to summarize your very inspiring word for the English audience. And Mr. Orsenna just recalled that since 13 years ago, when he wrote his book, the situation has just worsened. And he recalled us several of the international water conflict that we know between Ethiopia and Egypt, Turkey and Iraq, India and Bangladesh. Although he said that also there are some grain of hope. For instance, between Egypt and Ethiopia, an agreement should be reached because it was wise hydrologically to build a dam in the higher part where the evaporation is less. He also recalled that, for instance, between the mayor of Calcutta asked to say to the Bangladesh counterpart to stop the immigration, and the Bangladeshi counterpart said, yes, but you built a dam and so we don't have water and our fields are getting salty. So. But he also brought some hope, for instance, mentioning the organization for the Basin Authority for the Senegal River, that has been able to solve several conflicts by recognizing that the water of the river Senegal is a common good. Answering to my second question concerning the word, the magic word that might convince politicians, he put the accent on moving from the abstract concept of water to the river. That is something more tangible, that have a personality, has an history, and that might be much more convincing for politicians when they deal with something concrete. And indeed, he highlighted that the new field of hydrodiplomacy has as a natural expression the basin, the catchment, and that we should strive for a peace, or water peace at the basin level. I hope that I've been able to synthesize not too badly your thought. And
Monsieur, cher Président, vous êtes exceptionnel dans le résumé, puisque j'avais l'impression de vous avoir lancé une sorte de rafale de Kalachnikov, et vous avez réussi à résumer ça de manière magnifique. Et si j'étais japonais, je vous nommerais immédiatement trésor vivant du haïku.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. He praised my synthesis. Thank you very much. I'm very honored of receiving.
Et j'espère vous retrouver bientôt. Je suis désolé de vous quitter, mais comme je suis ambassadeur de Pasteur, il y a une grande réunion de levée de fonds de Pasteur que je dois rejoindre maintenant pour la santé. Donc à très bientôt, je vous souhaite très bonne chance et je suis très frustré de ne pas pouvoir continuer à entendre vos enseignements. Donc à très bientôt. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Et vive le trésor vivant du haïku.
Merci. Our next guest is Mr. Stefan Fritz, Program Director of the Strategic Initiative at the International Institute of Applied System Analysis. We see many amateur astronomers night after night chasing comets and asteroids, but there are far fewer amateur hydrologists observing water and level and water quality. This is curious because the risk of being swept away by a flash flood or of drinking dangerously polluted water is much higher than ending like dinosaurs swept away by an asteroid impact. What do you see as the major obstacle standing in the way between water science and citizen science?
Thank you very much. I guess everybody can hear me. That's really a great question. I mean, it brings us probably back to the human psyche that people do tend to go for the curious, for the cool things, but not always necessarily for the things which are useful for humankind. This is, I think, is a big challenge we are facing. Though I think there is an increasing recognition that citizen science can actually make lots of contributions, and more citizens and also public authorities are realizing the potential of citizen science and also engaging citizens, making citizen science and the observation, for example, of water levels something cool, something which needs to be done. And you know, having heard this previous intervention with the increases of flood and with the threats of flood, we see there is a real potential for citizens to play a critical role, for example, in disaster mitigation. There is one very interesting example which has been undertaken in a catchment area around Venice in Italy, where the public authorities have built an established citizen science observation system, and where a very detailed cost-benefit assessment has been done. So looking at what would be the costs of, in the end, the damage a flood would get without a system, and then having an established monitoring system, engaging citizens, but also linking this observation citizens to, for example, on water levels. They established 53 additional QR code-based water level monitoring systems. They're working in this area with more than 700 schools in that catchment area. They're educating people about the danger of floods. And through that whole system, which is not just the monitoring, but it's mainly also focusing on awareness raising, it's really possible to reduce the risk. So more this kind of social dimension of risk and the adaptive capacity is very much strengthened in that, so that people know when the water levels are rising that there is a risk, and they accordingly act to, and they get themselves into safety places, and also they make sure that some assets are safe timely, and this is really critical. And these are some very interesting examples we can see. So if you want to know more, this was actually published. It's on this Alto Adriatico Water Authority area, which is based in Venice, where this really very established, also supported by public authorities, citizen observatory has been built and is still being built. And this is one of the few examples where also public authorities do really acknowledge the potential of citizen science. But there are many other examples you can look into. We have done a systematic review of all the indicators, the SDG indicators, 244 by now, where we found that 1/4 or even more, up to actually more than 30% of those indicators can be complemented by measures done by citizens. And you might have heard about OpenStreetMap. This is, for example, one good example we can pull out from the World Bank as the custodian agency, where they have this rural accessibility as an index. What's the percentage of population connected to a 2-kilometer all-season road, for example. All these examples show that there is really a big potential also in the field of plastic and monitoring plastic debris along the beaches. There are very good examples, for example, in Ghana, where for the first time now there is an established methodology using an app called the Earth Challenge app, which is globally available, where a methodology of voluntary cleanup has been directly linked to measure the indicator 14.1.1 on plastic debris. So these are just some examples I can mention in this very short time I have on the potential of citizen science. And I think citizen science plays really an important role, not just in the monitoring, but also in addressing the SDGs, because without citizens, we are not going to reach the change which is needed in the next 10 years on the rapid transformation we need to get to. I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fritz. And now we move to our next panelist, Mrs. Sheila Patel. Mrs. Patel, in your role as a founder director of the Society for Promotion of Area Resources Center, a non-government organization in India that supports community organization of the urban poor, I've heard that you have been confronted with some major flaws in water data collection in cities in India. And could you describe what some of those shortcomings are, their impacts on water rights of a fragile community, and how they can be sustainably improved upon? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very deeply inspired by the speakers before me, and they have given me nice words to include in my discussion, the most exciting one being citizen science. So my first, since this is a data forum of the UN, I want to challenge everybody who collects data as to why all data has to flow upward to the UN and cannot be disaggregated for the use of what my predecessor called citizen science. As long as you can disaggregate information, it allows communities in all parts of the world to make representation to find solutions that are local. Yet everything is all gathered and aggregated, and we hear so many billion have water, so many billions don't have water, but that doesn't mean anything to a woman who lives informally in a slum, who is either buying water at 10 times the formal water cost, whose city often says that we have an average distribution system of so much, which is the standard, without acknowledging that 2/3 of the city which lives informally only has to buy water illegally. Now, where does all this come in our data sets? That's my first question, challenge to all of us. The second thing is that there is no disaggregation on the impact of bad quality water or no water or inadequate water on women's lives. Feminist groups keep talking about it, but the extent to which this process not only enters the data sets that you use, but also about what women want to do with those processes. So again, everybody else, the scientists, the data managers, the hydrologists, they decide what has to be done, and rarely does it come down to people. Apart from heading SPARC, I'm also part of a global network called Shack Dwellers International. We work in 200 cities, minimally, and we can collect data about the reality of the poor. Yet our cities don't want it, and our governments don't want it, and we make representations to global organizations. They say no, but their government won't accept it. So, second thing, why is only the data that is provided by nation states useful in a world which is hoping that digitalization will transform development choices? When are you going to liberate the right of different groupings of people to make representations that will feed back all the good things that you have been talking about? And so one of them is the whole area of citizen science. We have communities that are declogging drains, that are conserving water. But we also have to deal with the other conflicts that our first speaker mentioned, but has to be expanded. All the southern countries that we work in have deep water stress. India, I'm told, is 170 out of the 190. We have huge conflicts between cities that draw in water from the periphery, making their peripheries drought prone, taking away groundwater because of all the hand pumps that are there, destroying aquifers, of metropolitan regions that are not keeping the 60% cover of greens that is needed to maintain the ecosystems. These are all things that matter to poor communities, yet they do not get the right for representation. Their information is considered too minor, but its aggregation and disaggregation is not acknowledged. And finally, we keep hearing about very good examples. We heard about 3 or 4 so far. We can give you many more. The point is, why is this not scaling up? Why are good solutions not scaling up, adapted to local realities? And I think that's a very important question, because SDG data for the sake of data has no value for all the poor people in the world whose lives have to be changed. And therefore, my plea to all of you is create communication linkages that allow different groupings of people who generally don't talk to each other to talk to each other. Today, in most of our cities, floods are created out of delayed release of dam water. We know so many cities in which governments don't have protocols when to release the water from the dams. And both in Asia and Africa, we have seen so many of floods now, not so much out of downpour on your street, but downpour in the catchment area of the dam. So I feel that we have to trace these different levels at which challenges of flooding, drought, scarcity occur, and involve large networks like us to start looking at what value, what content can we provide, urban, rural, indigenous, there are lots of movements which can aggregate huge numbers of communities to give you qualitative data that can give solutions, but also become places where you can look at the innovations that have worked in one place to be multiplied by 1,000. So I want to stop there, but I want entry into your data world to question you and to transform the way we look at data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Patel, for your contribution. And I will move to our 4th panelist, Dr. Sera Young, Associate Professor of Anthropology and Global Health at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. We have rigorous methods for measuring the physical, tangible aspect of water availability and flow. And the joint monitoring program's drinking water ladder is, for instance, a good indicator for SDG 6.1. But other aspects of water issues are more difficult to grasp and present with simple number. However, you have been working on quantifying in a holistic measure the human experience of water security or insecurity. And so, can you tell us a little more about the water insecurity experience scale and why those will be useful for ensuring the future of sustainable water data?
Thanks, Tommaso. In all of the lead up to preparing this session, I've put a lot of thought into what makes something sustainable. They have kind of like 3 or 4 criteria, and one of those is it has to be interesting or compelling data. So we keep paying attention to it. Those data should be usable, like Sheila was talking about. They shouldn't be just for some people or for others. They should be for everyone. They should be data that promote action. So what do we do differently now that we have this information? And it shouldn't be a heavy ask. It should be easy to get the data. And so I'd like to think that this very new technique for measuring as a water indicator could perhaps promote the sustainability of water data. So when we think about what water security is, there are 4 pillars, and there's the physical availability that we're very good at measuring. There's some hydrologists on the panel. You have 8,000 ways of measuring physical availability. The JMP does a great job of measuring infrastructure with the drinking water ladder, and we have pretty good techniques for measuring water safety, some in the lab, some for the field. But in the field of water, we've been missing a holistic measure to understand about the story of humans in water. Now, for the food insecurity, we measure food insecurity experiences. Those are one of the indicators for SDG 2. And knowing about humans' experiences with food has revolutionized our understanding of food and nutrition. So we have gone ahead and developed such a scale for water. It's very analogous to the food. I think of the WISE scales, the water insecurity experiences scales, as like a sister to the brother of FIES. We capture 12 universal experiences. So sort of anyone knows about all of these phenomena of water being interrupted, of not being able to wash your hands because of problems with water, not being able to wash your body. They're easily the score. You say, I asked Tommaso, how often have you had to change your food because of problems with water? And you say never, you get a 0. If you say often or always, you get a 3, such that the range is 36, so 0 to 36. We have a cutoff, so we can talk about prevalence. You can ask these questions to a household or to an individual, which is particularly interesting to get at Sheila's point about getting at gender disaggregated data. And it's simple language, doesn't take long to collect. It's 3 minutes to ask these 12 questions. The analysis is straightforward. Even my 11-year-old can do it. And we're finding really powerful relationships. And if you just go to hwise.org, you can see the peer-reviewed papers talking about how water shapes economic well-being, physical well-being, nutrition, mental health. So we've been applying the scale at low levels, and we've been applying it at high levels. And the example I want to give to you today is a collaboration between UNESCO, Gallup World Polls, and my university, where in 2020, we estimated water insecurity using the IWISE scale, the individual water insecurity experiences scale, in 31 low and middle income countries, the ones pictured here. Now, these data are super exciting, and there's a lot to say about them, but I thought I would conclude by just giving you a taste of what some of the experiences of water insecurity look like around the world and how these water stories manifest. So at the bottom, you see the 12 items on which the scale is based. And along the left-hand side, you see the proportion of respondents who affirmed having experienced any of these. And you can see that there are a number of experiences that have happened to many people around the world. Interruption, water being interrupted is the most common. But there's a lot of emotion that comes along with water insecurity. So worry and anger are also quite common. And I just wanted to point out in this time of COVID, a significant proportion of respondents were unable to wash their hands specifically because of problems with water. So all this is to say is that if we want to have sustainable water data, we need water that's engaged. We need data that are engaging, that are accessible, and that are meaningful. And I'd like to encourage the audience to investigate this new scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. And I will move to our next speaker, Mrs. Nilay Doğulu. Sorry, apparently there was a problem with the... Okay, it's working now, sorry. So, thanks, Professor Young. And now we move to our next speaker, Mrs. Nilay Doğulu. She has been very active as member and former chair of the Young Hydrologic Society in promoting the young professional in water-related discipline. In some countries, hydrologists working for National Hydrological Services or other public company could almost be considered as an endangered species, as the workforce ages and new recruitment are frozen. This is despite considerable investment by the UN system and other development partnering long university curricula or short technical training. Mrs. Dogolu, in your opinion as a young hydrologist, just starting now your career, what are some of the barriers to working as a hydrologist? What can make working for a national hydrological service more attractive for young people that are just leaving the university?
Yes, thank you, Tommaso. I think I want to focus in my response on data science and the role of early career hydrologists, ECH. I will refer to it in my talk from now on. And the poll results clearly shows that data science have a big role. In a hydrological context, data science refers to complete data collection, management, analysis, visualization, and sharing pipeline. And following the increase in data and technological availability, the importance of data management and data science, it's huge. Moreover, there have been significant community-driven advances and tools to improve data accessibility, availability, analysis, visualization, and much more. Well, academia and research have been an active player that contributes to this rapidly transforming landscape of data science. And this success is obviously brought by early career hydrologists in science and research working with hydrological data. Also, the training culture of open science is enabling more opportunities for large data sets. In this respect, while academia and research effectively harnesses the power of ECH through research and innovation, the public sector remains generally unaware and unwilling to harness the same potential. There could be several reasons behind this. ECH, particularly with research experience, avoiding jobs in NHS and other public sector organizations. Well, first of all, lack of overarching data infrastructure and data management strategy. Secondly, lack of qualified personnel in NHS with interdisciplinary skill sets to apply leading data science knowledge and expertise, as well as limited job opportunities for data scientists, resistance to change, and finally, lack of support and trust. It's unfortunately true that some established hydrologists, as you say, endangered species in the NHS might be wary of the inexperience of ECH, as well as their passion to try new things and challenge the status quo. However, our true motivation and intention is to help fix existing operational issues while advancing data practices. This is what we can do in the least. We are born to a digital world, and throughout our life, we have been surrounded by data of all kinds and everywhere. However, we are not to be neither intimidated nor underestimated. Unless there is a positive change and increased support for ECH, building the local capacity in the NHS cannot be possible. We would like to encourage the NHS, especially in the developing countries, to hire more early career hydrologists with research experience, master's degrees, doctoral degrees, etc. A strategic shift must be worked through to enable hiring of ECH into well-paid, this is important, permanent data scientist positions. We are a vital resource to the public sector to create and lead the much-needed change. We are ready and willing to share our interests, passions, creativity, and energy to support the mission of the NHS. We believe that the NHS needs to reform their management structure as well as operational policies to hire and support early career hydrologists while keeping the pace with the data management and data science movements in line with open science initiatives also. These need to be accomplished have to be accomplished if the long-term goal of NHS is to ensure a bright future for sustainable water data for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Doğulu. And now our last speaker, Daniel Kull, is a senior disaster manager specialist with the World Bank Global Practice for Urban Resilience and Land. Mr. Kull, over the past decades, national and international donor agencies have invested significant amount of resources in the purchase and installation of equipment to monitor water. Nevertheless, we are still always confronted with a dramatic lack of data, especially in developing countries. And so my question is which are the actions that can be taken, especially with national finance authority and ministers, that are those that hold the string of the purse, to ensure that financial support is made continuously available for data collection. What do you see the role of the World Bank and other financial partners being in ensuring that such data are collected?
Thank you very much, Mr. Abrate. So to start, I mean, it's a decades-old challenge that we at the World Bank have recognized as being a real constraint, not only in terms of our project success, but also, of course, in terms of strengthening the water sector and every other sector that's dependent on water. Unfortunately, I think it's a challenge that will continue to confront us for decades to come. But I think there are some ongoing discussions and dialogues that are helping to move things in the right direction, although we still have a long way to go. So I think first thing, we need to recognize that the sustainability of water monitoring systems, and I'm here referring, of course, also to equipment from international projects like the ones that we do, where once the project is completed, they tend to often fall apart. They stop working within a few years because development finance like we provide cannot be used for operations and maintenance. That is actually the responsibility of the government themselves. But just to say, the sustainability of these equipment are also linked to the data policies. So it's not just a financial angle that we're talking about. It's a bigger picture issue that needs to be explored and understood in deeper detail. And there's a lot of ongoing work to inform this dialogue and this discussion. Of course, we have traditionally, and we continue to develop investment studies, cost-benefit analysis that shows that without sufficient budget to keep water monitoring systems operational, then the benefits aren't realized. So you've actually wasted money by investing in something that doesn't work, which is, of course, not a surprise to anyone. What we're more and more focusing on in the approach to economic efficiency studies, cost-benefit analysis, is the end of the user chain, where basically the decisions that are based on water information, if those aren't being taken because people don't have access to the data or the data doesn't exist, or people don't know how to use the data, there's improper use, if those decisions aren't taken in a productive manner, then actually the data isn't delivering much value at all, and the economic efficiency of an investment doesn't make sense. You can't just put in equipment without it being used. It doesn't lead to a good result. A challenge, though, is when you are a government, you're particularly in developing countries, you're facing a multitude of development challenges and priorities. And I think every sector is producing these kind of economic assessments, cost-benefit analyses. I mean, any minister working in a sector related to water will have a desk full of cost-benefit analysis saying, well, what we're doing is the most important, and water data is the most important, and education is the most important. And it's a tough situation to be in with limited resources. So we're trying to expand the dialogue to something broader in terms of the socioeconomic benefits of water monitoring as part of a broader understanding of how economic growth is achieved. Meaning that the data, water data, must be reliable and available for all stakeholders to benefit, and that the data itself, solely as data, has limited intrinsic value. Of course, for certain activities, it is quite useful and does deliver value, particularly for research. But what we're seeing is also that data is a huge driver of private sector growth. And by private sector growth, I don't just mean commercial companies as we think of, and sometimes in a very limited view, but also of individuals, of peoples, of smallholder farmers, of people managing their own risks in slums, of everyone who needs data, which is water, which is everyone, of course. So there needs to be a recognition that the services provided by using the data is where the real value is added, and that the data itself is only a facilitator and enabler of these services. And it's kind of an argument to say, stop selling data, which is a core need for everyone to manage their risks and to manage their water issues. You can sell services built off the data, but the data needs to be made available to everyone, if possible for free, or at least at the very most, as through a cost recovery approach. And again, there should be exclusions for people who cannot afford cost recovery of water data, because they still need the water data, and it's critical for their long-term stability and growth. So it's kind of a complicated conversation we're having with governments. We are making progress. We actually see some great developments in the recent years. And I'll give an example in Eastern Europe, actually in Hungary, not through a World Bank project of any sort, but in the last few years, the National Hydrometeorological Agency was able to move from a fee-based service and data approach, where they had to bring in about 80% of their budget through sales of data and services, to now 100% open data policy and approach, meaning their data is fully taxpayer funded and available. And what's great about this is this Hydrometeorological Agency of Hungary is now able to really focus on delivering high quality and robust data to everyone, and of course to fulfilling their public mandates. And it can be seen really as a huge effort to understand the economic benefits of data availability and data access, and to recognize that a relatively small public investment into making that open can really deliver huge benefits in terms of socioeconomic growth and resilience. And I would just add as a final point, moving this forward also requires a opening of what I call the water data space, meaning there is traditionally by a lot of governments the perception, particularly by the technocrats, that only data produced by the government is good data. Everything else is rubbish, which in itself is a rubbish thought. There are data sources of varying quality, and while one can assume that crowdsourced data might not meet the highest WMO standards, for example, it's still useful data. So there needs to be a recognition that by making the highest quality data available, as well as some of the less high quality data available, and using it together, exchanging it and sharing it, everyone benefits. From the public decision makers and the people responsible for early warning down to the smallholder farmers. It shouldn't be this exclusionary approach of we have the best data, so only we can use it. It should be everyone has some data, some of it better than others. We should make it available to each other and benefit from these different data sources through an open approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kull, for your intervention. And well, now we are coming to the end of our session. I wish to thank all the speakers for their inspirational and practical intervention. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Gillian Campbell, Head of Monitoring, Review and Reporting of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, for a synthesis and concluding remark of this session. Mrs. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This was a very interesting session, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I just want to conclude with a few messages that I think are consistent across everything that we've heard today, and really how do we ensure that water data is sustainable and that we're able to better measure water in the future. And I think the common message here is that local people need access to information. Everybody needs access to information so that they can understand their own situation and make decisions that will put them in a better position and improve their livelihood. I think there's lots of different ways that we can ensure that this sort of local level data is available and provides information to women. It provides information to people living in vulnerable situations. As you heard, from the first speaker, there is this issue in terms of communicating water data in a way that makes it accessible. It makes the language accessible to people outside of the hydrology world. And then we kind of drilled down into detail, and there was examples from Stefan on how do you actually work with citizens to measure flood mitigation issues in a way that provides information back to those citizens, so that as the citizens are involved in the data collection process, they're also more likely to understand what to do with that data and to be in a better position to make data-based decisions. And then Sheila went on to sort of further elaborate how you don't just need information that can be aggregated up and used for analysis, but this sort of information needs to be used by women who are working at or living at the local level with their families. How do they have information to be able to make decisions related to water quality and the impacts of water quality and water availability on their own life? And I think that this then led into the discussion of both Sarah and Daniel on how do we measure this in a way that's going to provide us the sort of information that's really the most useful for people, and how can we measure what people are experiencing and what and the risks that people are facing in a way that provides this information back to them, so that we can have a future where people are invested in collecting the water data because they know the value of that data for their own lives. And I think that this then also translates to our innovation from my young hydrologist. If more people understand these issues, and if there is more local level involvement, then it does seem likely that we would have more people who are also going into these fields and further developing the field of hydrology. And so I just want to conclude by saying I think that we're not so far off from having sustainable water data. We have seen lots of progress towards making data more accessible, being able to provide data that can be disaggregated at the local level and also aggregated up to the global level. But we still need to make this further push with people like the people at the World Data Forum to ensure that we're able to really communicate data, that we're able to really engage with citizens so that we have a future where we have the data that we need and we're able to use it for the decisions that need to be made. So that is it from me, Tommaso. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gillian, for your brilliant synthesis of this very vast debate that covers so many topics and so many points, all interesting. As we have still a few minutes, I don't know whether there is any question from the audience here, the one present physically in Bern, those online. I have noted a couple, so if I don't see any raised hands here, I would like to ask a question. We have heard mentioned at least 3 times, directly or indirectly, the citizen science. From Stefan Fritz, of course, because he was invited to talk about citizen science, but also from Mrs. Patel that evoked it, and indirectly also Mr. Kull, because when he was talking about low quality data, we also know that some of the reluctance from authority to accept citizen science data is because they are not trusted as reliable as the official data. Although, knowing that most of the new comets are discovered by amateur, we know that amateurs are capable of outstanding science. So this is maybe an undue suspicion about the quality of data. But I wanted to ask to the three that the question of this bias of the lack of disaggregated data that prevents community to find locally based solution? How can it be better addressed by promoting citizen science data? How can we encourage community to engage themselves in this in citizen science? And in a way also, how can we ensure that these citizen science data are not number random, but they really represent a physical reality? So my question is addressed to the three of you, Stefan, Mrs. Patel, and Danielle. So the one of you that want to reply, maybe just 1 minute, because if the three of you want to have a reply, we have just 6 minutes left. Mrs. Patel?
I think that routinization of relationships, mutual, checking on information to prove that it is not fictitious, all these things can be done in long-term relationships. So if you talk to me as Shack Dwellers International, and in India we work in 70 cities, worldwide we work in 300 cities, large, medium, and small. We can be your partners in collecting data and producing a citizens network that demonstrates information that is both political, technical, and development-based deficits that involve water. The other way of looking at it is that then you have so many networks through which valuable scientific and strategic and solution-based ideas can move from one geographic area to another, because that is as much a problem as the fact that there are many solutions that are there, but they cannot be translated into what would be locally acceptable. So when I listen to what the people in Venice are doing, I can give a counter example of what people in Indian cities are doing in relationship to water quality. It is not related to the problem that Venice had. But all poor people require to be able to get the water they drink tested. We can't get that access easily. That is, and the other very important thing is that there are huge relationship nodes in the governance and the political structure that are also obstructing this process. And in the global political situation, you're all very politically correct. So there are no accusations made, there are no allegations made. But the fact is that 40% of people who live in urban areas in the global south are drinking water which is well below the standard quality, whatever they get. How are we going to deal with that? Now, these are a whole host. I can give you 100 questions we have, but I'm sure they have answers somewhere. So I think we have to move away from the concept of modern piped water as the solution for water, which is what most of our cities are doing, to a more sustainable solution. So the modern concept of the 18th, 19th, and 20th century has to move into sustainable solutions of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stefan, we have 3 minutes left.
Yes, maybe some. I will try to respond to the question on the quality of citizen science data, and I think this is really a very important question, and it's the crux that citizen science data is also being trusted. But let's just look at what happened with COVID, right? At some point, people got a small device where they could test themselves, and that data which came out, a negative fast antigen test, was actually recognized. Even officially in Austria, you could actually look at yourself and kind of video yourself, and that was officially recognized data. And I think there are different types of citizen science. So some of it, when citizens are asked to sense something with their senses and eyes, and there needs to be some scrutiny of that data, that's very clear. But most citizens can be trusted because it's in their own interest. The data is for themselves, that the data is actually good quality. So they will not try to cheat, and I think that is important. But secondly, as I said, that there are all these devices now, these low-cost sensors, which are sensors by themselves, not just that citizens carry the sensor. That doesn't mean that the quality is no good, because these sensors and the sensors' quality has drastically improved over time. with the antigen test, for example, but also, for example, air quality sensors, PM 2.5, PM 5 sensors, they are really getting better each day. And these are sensors which citizens can carry, and the quality is what the sensor will read out. So we have to be really careful to disqualify citizens' data just because it's citizens' data, if many times this is actually coming from a low-cost sensor which the person carries with him. So just a very strong plea for the acceptance or as a complementary data stream of citizen science data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just 1 minute left. I don't know whether, Daniel, you have a 40-second chronometer on a Swiss watch. Yes. As you are in Geneva.
So very quickly, I think first of all, my opinion is authorities that rule out citizen data, citizen science-derived data, are ones who are very defensive about their data to begin with and are not taking an open approach. And it's to their loss and to the loss of the society they're supposed to support. I would give a great example of our hosts, Meteo Suisse in Switzerland, who uses data from all sorts of different sources and has a system in place to classify the quality for their own purposes, but also supports the improvement of the data by all the different partners, whether it's schools or individuals. So I think there is a way to support it. And my final point, a great example also is to put together a platform that uses citizen-derived data and is then useful not only for people, but also for authorities. We see this with Blitzortung, which is a crowdsourced lightning detection system. And I know countries in Eastern Europe, for example, who don't have their own lightning detection systems, use this data for their own disaster management. So it's sort of a moving the data and the results up as well as down the chain of authority.
Thank you very much. We are in Switzerland. We finished at 10:01. Thank you very much for all the participants, to our panelists, and hope to see you at the next UN World Data Forum.